Welcome to the Private Practice Startup Podcast, where we help ambitious private practitioners across the globe to brand themselves and grow their dream practices. We chat with successful private practitioners, business coaches, and marketing experts, bringing you tons of practice building ninja tips. Visit privatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and our signature marketing e-course. Here are your co-hosts, Dr. Kate Campbell and Katie Lemieux.
Hey, Startup Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the third Up Close and Personal podcast series. Our actual guest today is a first-time guest on our podcast, which is really exciting, but she is not a first-time guest with us here at the Private Practice Startup. But before I introduce her, I hope that you guys listened to yesterday's episode of Up Close and Personal with none other than Gordon Brewer, and we had a great time with him, and he shared with us his weekend at Bernie's moment. I'm not divulging anymore. Y'all are going to have to listen to that because it was hysterical. Good laughs. So today's guest is Jessica Tappana, and Jessica is not only a therapist, but she is the owner and creator of Simplified SEO Consulting, and she's done an amazing job in one of our master classes, really teaching therapists how to utilize SEO to gain more clients, and she was super awesome, and her steps were easy, and it was just really great to have her. So we're really excited to have her on Up Close and Personal today because you guys voted for her, and Jessica actually shared with us that she was listening to some of our past episodes of Up Close and Personal and how excited she was and how fun it was, and now she's actually in the hot seat today. So you guys are going to be getting to know her very shortly. And if you're brand new to our podcast, we want to say welcome to the Startup Nation family. It is a joy and pleasure to have you here. And our family is into gift giving. So we'd love to give you a gift. Head on over to privatepracticestartup.com. Head on over to the resources tab. And there you'll see a bunch of free gifts for you. I would definitely recommend checking out our free HIPAA form. It's customizable and attorney approved. If you are a therapist, you have to do paperwork. So you might as well have paperwork that has been reviewed by an attorney so you feel safe and secure. So go ahead and grab that and whatever else you'd like. So let's dive in. So just a little bit about Jessica. Jessica believes in the power of therapy to transform lives when clients are able to easily find the therapist who they fit with. In addition to her private practice in Missouri, Jessica founded Simplified SEO Consulting to give mental health professionals resources they need to get their website ranking well and in front of more of the clients they love to serve. Jessica's favorite thing about running Simplified SEO Consulting is watching her SEO specialists grow their own skills even beyond her own and hearing success stories of former clients who now have a steady stream of calls from the right clients. I got to tell you, Jessica, that is our favorite. As I talk about, I'm getting chills now. Our favorite thing with our coaching clients is just they have so many of them are just beyond what we ever knew possible. So that's so exciting.
I think it's so cool in this field, just watching people grow. When you think about it, as therapists, we get a firsthand view of people in their biggest moments of growth. And then I know with me with Simplified or with your coaching, you get to see it again in a different form, in the form of business. And yeah, it's just so much fun to watch people grow and be yeah, I was this big of a part of that, just a little
yeah. And the thing I love about coaching is you're touching many at once, where in therapy, it's just you and kind of the client or the couple or the family. And coaching, it gets to expand beyond that. But anyways, we're not here to talk about business today. We're here to talk about you. And Kate and I always love to just take a step back in time and talk about the story of you and your upbringing and where you grew up and your siblings and your family makeup and good times and bad times. And I'm throwing a lot of questions at you, but
that's typically what Katie likes to do.
That's okay. Then that way I can pick and choose which ones I respond to, right? Yeah, no, now we're going to talk about the stuff that we never talk about publicly. No.
Exactly.
So I was born in Minnesota, and I lived there for a whole 2 months before I moved. So I think that's kind of funny because if you look at my birth certificate, you're you're from Minnesota. I'm no, I am completely from Missouri. We moved here when I was 2 months old. And then I am the oldest of three. I have two little sisters. And then my parents divorced when I was young. There was a period of time where I was going back and forth between houses and doing that whole thing before eventually we lived full-time with my mom and my stepdad. And I really confuse people because usually when I talk about my dad, I'm talking about my stepdad. He was probably the single most influential person in my life. And he has 2 sons who were grown before we came into the fold. My parents are actually 18 years apart in age. So my stepbrothers were never like lived in the same house as us. And so it's really funny because I usually will call my stepdad my dad. And then if I refer to the boys, a lot of times I'll be like, my dad's sons. And people are like, oh, it's your brothers. And I'm like, well, kind of. I mean, I never lived in the same house as them, but they're amazing and wonderful and family. So yeah, I grew up kind of with that dynamic of having 2 parents who said that like Missouri was their home base, and we traveled, and my dad was huge on traveling. He wanted us to appreciate people who were different than us, to appreciate different cultures and different religions and different languages. And so that was, I think, a huge part of who I am. I decided when I was 12, I was going to be a therapist when we had a therapist help us out. And I like developed this huge plan. It was like, I was going to like go to school to be an elementary education teacher because I was very practical and I needed a job to do while I went back to grad school so I could be a psychologist. And then I was going to open a private practice at age 30. Ironically, I did not get the degree in psychology. I'm a licensed clinical social worker instead, but I did open my private practice when I was 30. But yeah, so like that was kind of I don't know what I had, my life plan I developed at 12, and everything like revolved around that in high school. Even I was like AP student, like I've got to see how many AP credits I can get to like go into college. And so you can imagine I was a little bit of a dork, slightly. Yeah, I'll claim I was a dork. And even like choosing a college, I was like, how can I like get the best education, not stay at home, and but like not take out a ton of debt. And so I went away for school for a year before I got in this car accident. I think that's why my mom came and she's like, okay, if you will move back and go to school in Columbia, we will pay for you to have your apartment, so you don't have to live at home. I was like, done, no debt. I'm coming home. So I came home and went to University of Missouri for undergraduate, worked for a couple of years, went back, got a graduate degree. And yeah, I don't know if I'm just supposed to talk about childhood right now or
you're doing fine.
But yeah, then I worked at the state hospital and worked at kind of the thing that we all do. I was actually a nanny when I went back to grad school. Again, I'd been a nanny and a preschool teacher in undergraduate and loved that. I loved being a nanny, and it was a great way to work towards my graduate degree. And then went back and worked at the state hospital again after getting my master's degree while I worked on my licensure. Worked at a private school for kiddos who weren't able to be served in the public school anymore due to behavioral concerns mostly. And then I started my private practice on my maternity leave, and the rest is kind of history. My maternity leave with my second kiddo.
How interesting. So before we dive more into your story, I'd love to just take a quick moment for our sponsor.
If you've ever felt lost trying to find great people for your business, you need to try Wise Hire. They're an online recruiting system that makes the hard parts of hiring, like making ads, posting to job boards, and tracking candidates fast and easy. Plus, they're super affordable. We love that their DISC personality assessment helps you find exactly who you're looking for. We know it's tough to juggle all you do, and hiring the right way can be a full-time job. With Wise Hire, it feels like someone's with you, supporting you every step of the way. Their team lives and breathes their mission of both helping you hire and helping teams create fulfilling careers and happy lives. And that's something we really believe in. Right now, they're offering a free strategy session to the private practice startup listeners. If you're thinking about growing your practice, you got to get on this call. They are the experts on building amazing teams from the ground up. Start hiring or book your free strategy session today at wisehire.com/PPS. That's Wisehire, WIZEHIRE.com/PPS.
Tired of never quite feeling comfortable with your practice financials? I'd like you to meet Green Oak Accounting. Their goal is to empower private practice owners with the financial information they need to make good business decisions. They specialize in working with solo and group private practices in the mental health industry, so they're uniquely positioned to help with figuring out what's normal in your business finances and what's not. So if you've ever had a conversation with your accountant or bookkeeper that left you wishing that they understood private practice or had some best practices to share, head on over to greenoakaccounting.com and schedule a free consultation to see if they might be a good fit for you. They can help you with all your accounting needs, from bookkeeping to payroll to profit first and budgeting, as well as forecasting. Also, check out their new podcast, Therapy for Your Money, where Julie Harris talks about all things money, finance for private practice. I really enjoyed kind of listening to your story, and I know that you talked about your stepdad, your dad, being the single most influential person in your life, and you kind of said in travel, and he taught about different religion. Share a little bit more about him and how else he impacted you.
Yeah, he was absolutely incredible. The day that I got married, I actually thanked my mom for two things. I thanked her for getting her PhD and marrying my dad. I'm like, those were like two huge things that you did for me. And I think my dad we were talking earlier before the start about, politics and like how some people are more political than others. I think my dad was more political than I am, in that like he was more outspoken. But one thing I really took from him is this idea that people are different from you and that's okay. And being able to see that difference and accept that difference. And so that was, I think, really one of the things that I just took from him was this idea that it's okay for people to be different than I am, whether that's politically or religious or culture or however that looks. And so he never formally adopted us. So when I turned 18, I still had a different last name than him. This meant that every time than both my parents, because my mom had taken his last name. So every time I was at church and somebody would see like my name written down, or we were traveling and people would look at our passports, or, you name it. People knew we had a different last name. And so they would be like, okay, so like, who's your real dad? And I'm like, oh, he is. Not that it discounts my birth father, but like legitimately he did a lot for us. So I actually changed my name when I was 18 and he helped me with that. Like I didn't hire an attorney. Like we figured out how to write all the paperwork. Looking back, I'm like, wow, that was like a bit gutsy to do it without the attorney. But I did, it helped a little bit. And then and then I was like, okay, now I'm aligned with him. I have his last name. And he actually was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so I tried to get pregnant with my son a little bit earlier than we planned. My son's a couple years younger than he was originally supposed to be in that whole 15-year plan I told you about, because we decided he had to meet his first grandchild. But I guess now I'm a little bit out of order here, but my son's name is Oliver, which was my last name, was my dad's last name, my maiden name. And that's because when I changed my last name, I'd only had it for 5 years. I got married really young. I got married at 23. So having changed my last name at 18, get married at 23, that's 5 years. I told my husband at the time when I sat in like the Social Security parking lot, I called him, I'm like, okay, I'll take your last name, but only if we name our first son Oliver. And so when my dad invited himself to the hospital to find out my son's gender, we had, for whatever reason, told him what time we were going to be there. And so we walk in to get the ultrasound and my dad's in the waiting room. And so we're like, okay, he can come back. And when he found out, knowing what we were going to name a boy, and he found out he was a boy, he literally started like jumping up and down and screaming in the hospital. I'm like, oh my gosh, the whole floor now knows that we're having a boy, but he knew that he'd be Oliver. And they were like the best of buds for a long, like my dad died a little bit before my son's second birthday, but we have a million pictures of them together. And dad used to say like, she named him after me. And I'm like, well, kind of, yes. But the plan was actually before you got sick to name him that. And then when we were pregnant with her, we're like, wow, it'd be really bad if we just named her some cute name. Like, I love like the name Josie, or I shouldn't use that as an example, but like there are so many cute names. I'm like, we could name our child and, but like, what's the story going to be? How do we make this even between the two kids? And so we actually named my daughter, Parker, which is my mom's maiden name, so she would feel included. And so we could be like, look, you both were named maiden names in our family, or family names. And if she'd been a boy, she would have been, Cooper, which is another husband's family name. But that's, kind of I don't know, my dad's influence. And he's, even with building my businesses and stuff, his voice, I feel like, is just always right there and always guiding me in so many ways. His youngest son, my stepbrother, helped with the logo for my business and has helped so many, he's helped quite a bit actually with graphics and stuff for the business. And I'm always sitting here thinking like, wow, Dad would have loved to see his two kids working together like this. Like that would have been.
Oh, cool. Very cool. What are some of the things, like when you think about business and growing your business and things like that, that kind of resound in your own mind that your dad would say?
A lot of it has to do with like just that it's okay to take chances. His favorite phrase was like, there's a solution to every problem. I think you guys probably know with growing businesses, there's always a problem to solve.
Yes. Always.
Always, right? And so that one is the one that I keep coming back to over and over and over again, is this idea that like there's something that can be done to solve it. Sometimes it's pivoting in really big ways, but that's okay, and that we can think outside the box. Also, like this idea that, my dad was like, when we were kids, my parents, when we would argue, they would talk about win-lose thinking. And they're like, you're thinking win-lose. Like, why are you thinking win-lose? Like, how about you think win-win? How can we all win? And like, that was, I think, their biggest annoyance was when my sisters and I would try to like one of us win an argument. Like, I was right. And they were very big on like, it's not about being right. It's not about one of you getting, your way. It's about looking for a way that everybody can win and everybody can walk away from this situation happy. And I feel like that's very much so the take that I've taken to building my businesses. Like with my private practice, we have amazing clinicians in my area. Like I have great friends that are technically like competitors, but I don't like thinking of them as competitors. Instead, I'm like, well, how can we all win? Well, there's no shortage of people that need counseling. There really aren't. And so instead, if I look at it as each person I meet in town, I'm trying to learn, what are you the best at? Who's your ideal client? What clients do you have a gift with that I don't? And so then instead of thinking of it as like, how do I grow my business bigger than theirs? It's more like, how do I grow my business with the right clients and help them grow their business with the right clients and referring. And I feel like that was something I got, I think of my dad with that, but that might not be fair. It might be more fair to say like from my parents, from both of them, because they both were, constantly kind of instilling that idea in us that it's not about, if I can beat you, it's about how we can better one another and come out on the other side with both of us getting what we need.
I love the values that your parents taught you growing up. Like, that's so great. And it's just like so important. And I love that they challenged you like, okay, I know that you're thinking win-lose, but how can you think win-win, and kind of forced you to think that way, because it is such a mindset shift. And I know like early on, if we're not kind of getting trained on how to make that mindset shift, like that's what just kind of goes into adulthood. And then we have that mentality. I'm curious, Jessica, for you. So like, what happened at 12 that you knew you wanted to be a therapist? Like, I got to know.
Like two things happened at the same time. First, I was in therapy for the first time and loved our therapist. Like she was our safe space, like for our family, and my sisters and I, we're going through some stressful stuff, but it was like going to her office was like this little oasis. They had Reader's Digest in the lobby, and we would spend hours out there. Like, if somebody else, if a sister was in talking to the therapist, then like our dad would be out there reading Reader's Digest, all the funny parts of it. There were like 3 different sections that had jokes. And so I had those positive associations. At the same time, I was kind of quiet, serious, and I had this friend group in 6th grade, and they all started coming to me with all their drama. They were hitting that age that girls do, where girls get a little dramatic, and they just kept coming to me and like telling their side or whatever. And I guess I was a good listener. And so they told me that. They're like, you're a good listener. Like, you should listen to people for like a job someday. And I was like, oh, I know someone who does that. Yes, I can do that. I'll do her job someday. And so and she was in private practice. So I think that's why I also associated with like, clearly that was where I was going to go with it, because that's that's what she did. And they said I was a good listener. So therefore I could be, the next, her name was Dr. Myers. I'm like, I could be the next Dr. Myers. I could do her, this thing that she does. And so yeah, it was really funny. And so once I announced that to my friend group, then they started coming to me even more. And then it was just a sealed deal. And I was the therapist of the group at age 12 for a little while.
Yeah. So you were practicing even early at a very young age.
I hate that. I'm looking back. I'm like, man, who knows what I said, but
I'm sure you made a difference in your peer group. I'm sure you did.
That was funny.
So I'd like to go back to your childhood for just a little bit, but let's just take another break for our sponsor.
When you're in private practice, it can be tough to find the time to review your marketing efforts, let alone make improvements when they're needed. Whether you're a seasoned clinician whose current website needs to be revamped, or a new therapist building a website for the first time, Brighter Vision is here to help. By understanding your business and what makes it unique, Brighter Vision's team of designers then uses this information to create a custom website catered to your specific marketing goals. Better yet, every website includes professional search engine optimization to make sure you get found in online searches, as well as unlimited technical support so your website can change and grow along with your practice. The best news of all, listeners of the Private Practice Startup Podcast get $100 off any new website. To get started, head on over to brightervision.com/PPS. Again, that's brightervision.com/PPS. Let's take it back to your childhood again. And I'm curious, if your parents were on the podcast with us, how would they describe you?
Oh man, I'm trying to think. Probably bossy. I was very bossy. And later, when I got older, and some of it that started when we were going back and forth between sets of parents, and I was the oldest that was going back and forth, and so I felt like I needed to boss them around. Hey, get this stuff together. We're going back to mom's, that sort of thing. But like I remember, by the time we were teenagers, my mom just getting really frustrated with me, being like, "Let me parent them," type of thing. And I was like, "But you're not parenting them right. Like, I know the way to do it." Because every teenager knows how to parent their younger siblings.
That's right. My mom would yell at me and she's like, "I'm the mom." But it was funny when my brother, I don't know if he had a lisp or something growing up, when no one could understand him, then they would turn to me and be like, "Katie, what is he saying?"
But I thought you were the parent.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I think that's a natural, probably oldest child tendency to some extent. And then maybe I was taking it a step too far, at least according to my parents. I adored my sisters, though, and I still do. I'm really lucky that they're pretty cool most of the time. Didn't see it that way always. But yeah, no, I was bossy, and I think that I got grouped sometimes into being the quote-unquote smart one. I don't think that that was always intentional, but I know my dad would compare me to his oldest son, who is a genius. And so sometimes that was a bit intimidating. So I'm like, oh, he's really smart. Like, I don't know that I'm that smart, but it was a compliment for sure. And so I think that those kind of were, we all kind of play a role in our family. And I think I definitely played the mothering hen child, and then also kind of the more studious one.
Gotcha. And it sounds like you're very organized and planned and stuff like that. So when you get thrown a wrench, no matter what it is, whether it's COVID or other things, how do you usually respond?
I joke that COVID has had to change my personality a little bit. But yes, I think I've always been a planner, especially probably earlier in life. I think going into business for myself and becoming a parent are two things that had to stretch me a bit. And luckily, I really love those things. I love running my businesses. I love my children. And so that makes it a lot easier to put up with the unknown. I think that's what really would throw me for a loop. A little change, I'd be like, okay, dad says there's a solution to every problem. I can figure this out, like in high school and stuff. I did a lot of going to my parents and going, okay, how do you do this? A teacher changed the expectations on me. What on earth do I do now? And I remember changing majors in college from elementary education to social work, mostly because I heard social work was the most efficient time and money-wise to get to where I wanted to be, which was doing therapy. But that was super duper planned. And then in life, you can't be that planned. things happen. This was supposed to be the year that like we're supposed to be doing little SEO workshops all over the country. I had like 6 of them planned. We got in one before COVID started and had to obviously cancel the rest. And so there's been a lot of pivoting. I'm now homeschooling my 7-year-old. That was certainly not the plan. Everything about this year is not the plan, but I joke that now I'm getting a lot less stressed when those things come up because it's to the point where it's just expected. Oh, okay. There was another thing that happened. Got it. Cool. What are we going to do about it? And so I think that as I get older, not that I'm old, as I grow up, we're going to say I'm still growing up. I like that way of looking at it. As I grow up, I'm learning that Dad was right, that there is a solution to every problem. And when life throws me a wrench, I can take a moment to be really upset about it. And then I'm going to have to just find a different way to look at it. You know, my daughter was supposed to go to Atlanta for her birthday. It was going to be like this really big special trip for us because she'd never been on a plane and I was going to do this whole thing with her. And that was like the week that everything shut down. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I don't think it's like cool to take the daughter turning 3 on an airplane this week. And so we had to like overnight, I was like, I have no birthday presents for her. Nothing else in the wings, because that was going to be a pretty big present. And so we just were like, okay, Dollar Tree. Everything that's remotely frozen here, some fun dresses, and she's 3 and never noticed that it was different than it was supposed to be. And, you know, we moved the whole practice online over a weekend. So I kind of like everybody else, it's just taking a moment to go, this sucks that I'm having to make a change, and how am I going to solve it? Let's not stay in the box I've been in before. That box is no longer relevant.
Yeah, for sure. So with all of that and all of the stress and the pivoting and stuff like that, what do you do for self-care and to really just manage your own mindset?
I think I've learned self-care for me can't be about one area of my life, because that one area can change, whatever that area looks like. Like tomorrow, something could happen in that one area. And so having areas of self-care in more than one part of my life, I think, is important. And then also just recognizing the flexibility. I think since about 6 months into creating my private practice, the first 6 months, I kept trying to find like the perfect schedule, thinking I'm going to have the schedule that lets me balance work and home. And that didn't happen. And finally, I just was like, okay, we're in a college town. Now when I set my schedule, I intentionally only set it for that semester, which of course COVID caused me to change it completely last spring. But just looking at like any schedule I set, any plans I make, this is temporary, and just assuming that my work-life balance will have to change. There are times where my kids need a lot more of me. Right now, definitely with the homeschooling thing, like my son's needing a certain amount of time from me that he hasn't always. And there are times where my businesses need more, or one business needs more than the other, you know, and I have to be okay with that change. But at the end of the day, I ask myself, like, what are all my values? Which values are most important? Like family is always the most important, but that doesn't mean that there aren't times I have to put more time or energy or something into my business. I have to check first and be like, is family, that's my top value. Is that secure? Are they doing okay? Okay, now I need to go do XYZ for this spurt in my business, in this business, or in that part of my life, or go help this friend that's struggling. So I try to keep values in mind, and I try to keep flexibility in mind. And I totally and utterly fail at finding that perfect balance quite frequently.
But I really love that you take the values approach. And I think that just really anchors us in, you know, rather than doing a task or choosing this, is always coming back to the values. And Kate and I talked a lot about this just in creating a business, and how when you're clear on your values and you're deciding on what I should do next, or who should I partner with, or whatever, what's the next step, is when you come back to your values, it almost decides that decision, you know, for you at the time. And it's just clear, you know what I mean? But you're right. I think we all are, you know, even though we're doing well with time management overall, I always feel like that's something I'm constantly trying to master, you know what I mean? And watching myself all of the time. So
it's hard.
Challenging. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say it's so challenging, and I can hear that you do an amazing job, being able to juggle that, although there's really difficult days and days where it might flow a little bit better. I just wanted to acknowledge that. Yeah, it's tough to own two different companies and have multiple kids and be homeschooling in the middle of a pandemic. I'm in the same boat. Relating to a lot of what you're talking about here.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I was listening last week to your podcast. I'm like, oh, you have kids around the same age and some of that same struggles for sure. It's a unique time in our life. And I think that that's the other thing I remind myself is I'm like, and sometimes I compare it the way I keep house now to the way I kept house when I had one kid. And I'm like, why could I do it when I had one kid? I'm like, because I only had one, and because I was working a nice, steady job that got out at the same time every day. And there were no crises, and it was just very different. And so I think I have to allow myself to have that grace. I still value cleanliness. Let me be clear. I really value organization. It's a strong value of mine. It's just at the end of the day, I value connection with my kids more. And so, this time of year where I know it's going to start getting colder, there have been several days recently where I've looked and I've been like, oh my goodness, the kitchen counters definitely are getting a bit full. It needs to be cleaned, but it is nice outside. So we are getting in the vehicle and we're going to the park and we're going for a walk. And that's a very different decision than I would have made a few years ago. But it's just my priorities have shifted a bit. And especially with COVID, I'm like, man, we're not gonna be able to go anywhere soon. When it gets cold here and it's already, starting to head that direction, I'm like, a lot of our normal winter options are not going to be very available potentially, because it's not suggested to do some of the things that we might normally want to do.
Yeah. It's funny as you're talking about your kids and the messiness and organization and stuff like that. I know when you and I did the master class together, you had alluded to your children playing in the dirt. How does that make you feel?
Oh my goodness. They stretch me every day. And now we have a dog that's helping them play in the dirt. And it's something else. It definitely stretches me. I remind myself about 90 times a day that this is part of childhood, that I have to let them do these things because it is good for their development. And we also have a rule that if we're at the dining table and they get messy, with food, because they're children and they often are, I don't mind cleaning them up. But if my husband is home, he gets that job and he's sweet. And he's especially if he gives them ranch. I hate ranch. So he'll give them ranch. I'm like, if they get ranch all over their face, I'm sorry, you're cleaning that up. So no, it's definitely a challenge, and I value them getting messy. And so that's really hard to know that that's good for them. I'm the one that got out the shaving cream to write spelling words in last week, and my husband just started laughing. He's like, you are getting that out. You are cleaning it up. And I was like, I will, because it's this great memory I have from first grade where I did that. So I feel like he needs to do that.
How fun. It's funny as you talk about the ranch, I was you kind of answered a little pet peeve question or something that freaks you out or whatever. I'm curious, Jessica, what were some of your hobbies growing up, and are they still the same today, or have they kind of transitioned?
A lot of them have transitioned for practical reasons. I think, for many years, upper elementary school for sure, I was figure skating. And so that was something that was kind of, I guess, a little bit different than my peers. I mean, we did the whole wake up at 5 a.m. and go to practice type thing for a little while even.
Wow.
Which was quite fun. But then reading was the other one. I was very, very into reading, and that maintained until I had kids. And now it's if I read, it's Mike Michalowicz's most recent book. That's my idea of reading these days. And so, that one has definitely changed. But those are the ones that come to mind really quickly, would be the reading and figure skating. I played the piano. I don't know that I would call it a hobby, more something I just took way more seriously than I had to, and probably had no natural talent at. So I don't know about hobby. I was very sentimental. And so creating scrapbooks was a big thing. Even when I was little, I maybe didn't have the skills to create scrapbooks, but I would we always got pictures printed out back then. You didn't get them on your phone or whatever. And so I had little arrangements in my bedroom of pictures and something special that went with the picture, sometimes little tokens, my a picture of my pet chicken, I'd have like one of his like feathers. And then as I got into like high school, it was like creating scrapbooks. And then eventually the really cool thing was creating like the digital like photo collages. That my friends loved that I was kind of known for that. In high school was
that's one of the things I do after every trip we go on. I create like, a book, because you're right. It's like you leave it in your phone and then I don't know, something happens to your SD card or it all erases and stuff like that. But I'm curious, you mentioned your pet chicken. What was your chicken's name?
Chirper. What else would you name a pet chicken? It chirped.
That is so funny. Chirper.
Kids like name things exactly what they are. Like I remember my brother had a bear or something like that, and it was white. He's like, Snowball, right? It's white, Snowball.
Really?
Makes sense.
My grandma, when I was a kid, had a cat named Cat.
Mm-hmm.
And we would laugh about it. It was around the same time I had Chirper, the chicken. And my mom goes, it's a miracle I wasn't named Baby. I think I come from a line of practical women.
That's too funny.
But yeah, no, our chicken was Chirper, and we had a dog, and they were best friends until one day being best friends with the dog was unfortunate. And the dog moped for weeks, the way I remember it. Like it was not a purposeful execution. It was pretty accidental. And so the poor dog was just depressed that
Aww.
the chicken was gone. But we had chickens, we had hamsters, we had domestic rabbits, we had wild rabbits that we rescued from a dog's mouth, a cat, what else? Hamsters, cockatiels. Yeah, we had a few pets. There's one point where we had 6 pets. That was when we moved to live full time with my mom. And so like the day they came to like help us finish moving, I remember like we had the 2 rabbits in the van that I was in, and then like the hamsters in the other one, and they had 2 dogs. We had 2 dogs already at their house. And so, yeah, 6 pets at that point. And,
wow.
I know there are people with more, but it was, a house full.
Did you have a favorite?
That's a good amount of pets.
Yeah.
It was too many for my mom.
Did you have a favorite type of pet, or one of them were your favorites?
When we had the chicken, that was my favorite for sure.
Yeah.
Otherwise, dogs and cats you have such a connection with. My cat they'd had since before I was born, and I had him for 13 years and slept with him. He'd be like right up by my face like cats do, and so I think I really adored him. And then dogs, we went through several when I was a kid, but I think that I definitely you always have that special connection, I feel like, with dogs. And a couple of them in particular, we just got a dog for the first time, a pandemic pup. We were part of that craze. It was a thing. Like all the breeders were out of puppies because everybody was wanting a puppy. And so we were part of that trend, and it came back to, I was like, our kids have never had a pet. There's something wrong with us. Like kids need a pet. And not that like there's a huge thing, but just because I grew up with pets, my husband grew up more with outdoor pets. And so he was like, really, is it that important? I was like, yes, it's that important. And so we got a puppy now that I'm home and I have working from home and have time supposedly to train a dog. It's sometimes I joke. I'm like, did I really think that through? Because now I'm like trying to train a puppy who wants to join all my Zoom calls.
One more thing to juggle during the pandemic.
Right? It seemed smart. I was like, I would never be home this much. It's perfect. And I'm like, and yeah, it's one more thing. Like, I don't have enough going on, but he's adorable and he's learning, and he's a miniature Australian Shepherd. I had my favorite puppy growing up, that we had just for ages, Tiger. We had him until I was an adult. He was an Australian Shepherd, and I had such fond memories that I was like, okay, I need an Australian Shepherd. They didn't have any Australian Shepherds within like an hour of us. And this is back in April when like you weren't supposed to like go anywhere. Like it was we didn't go anywhere. And so I was like, I can't drive a long ways to pick up a standard Australian Shepherd. So we got a miniature Australian Shepherd because it was only half an hour away, and they would meet us outside, and we're like, okay, this feels about as safe as you can get. And they had a puppy available, which is good. I wanted to train it from the beginning. So we went and we got him, and he's perfect. But yes, they are work. And in the best possible way. He's learning, and he's also funny. The funny thing about training a dog in a pandemic that I'm not hearing other people talk about, but that's really problematic, is we're taking puppy kindergarten virtually. which is a hoot. It's over Zoom. It's working. We've taught our puppy all these cool tricks. He waves, he shakes, he sits, he heels. And then the minute that we step outside and he sees another human being, he goes crazy because he doesn't get out as much as you usually would if you were training a puppy. And suddenly the dog doesn't know how to sit when all we've done is like gone to my mom's. I'm like, you've been here 1,000,000 times. He's like, but it's the only place I ever go. I can't possibly listen to you right now.
Kind of like kids.
Yes.
Too funny. Well, Jessica, it's been so fun just kind of hearing you share your story and the important things. I think it'd be a good time to shift into our lightning round. We're going to ask you a bunch of questions, rapid fire, and whatever comes to the top of your mind, you'll go ahead and answer.
Okay. Yes. All right. I'm going to throw the first one out there. What's one of your most embarrassing moments? Put you on the spot.
Oh, yes. Like every day I have an embarrassing moment. Does that count? Probably, I don't know. That's a really hard one. Can we come back to that?
We sure can. What is one of your favorite musicians or groups?
Okay. I like a decent variety of music, but I'm really bad at like knowing pop culture and stuff. So it's not like someone super current, but it is someone super awesome. Probably Garth Brooks. And part of that has to do with my husband and I went to one of his concerts really early in our dating, and it was really cool. And so, yeah, and he just has meaningful music.
This is an interesting question that was submitted. Someone asked, toilet paper roll over or under?
Let's go with over.
Over.
Do you actually know?
You know what that's?
Yeah, no, it's been a like debate, I think, amongst people for ages, but we definitely had that debate in our house growing up, and people had very firm opinions and would get very frustrated if you did it wrong. And so somewhere along the line, I must have gotten the idea that over is the way that you have to do it.
So this is so funny to me.
That's so funny. Go ahead, Katie. I'll chime in afterwards.
It's so funny to me just because like you shared with us how you were raised, like people have different opinions and that's okay. But toilet paper roll over or under, there is a clear right or wrong way to do it. And it's over in your house.
And the right amount of toilet paper, there's only so many squares.
So there'd be like, major conflict in your home and about the toilet paper if someone did it wrong. But, political, religious, other views, that's okay. We accept that.
That's all good. Before you get confirmed, you have to go check out some other churches, but toilet paper, and you have to change it often. Like mom would get so frustrated. I think it's like maybe a common thing amongst parents. I don't know. Nobody else helps change toilet paper rolls in my household yet, but my mom would complain like, it's right there. Why didn't you just change it? So
exactly.
It's so funny because this is actually a pet peeve of mine. And I thought I was like so weird for having the pet peeve of always wanting the toilet paper to be over. Our family, we were in the hospitality industry growing up. So there was the correct way to do the toilet paper roll. And whenever I go to somebody else's house or another place and it's under, I'm like, oh gosh, it's under. It's just like a funny thing. I never really say anything. I just think it in my head.
So I just got to say, if you guys are wondering like, wow, Kate's really quiet these podcasts. What is going on? Well, the reality is there's never a dull day in the podcasting world when it comes to Kate right now. She's dealing with internet issues and trucks backing up and so many other things going on. So that's why she's been a little bit quiet, because sometimes the internet is not working as well as she would like.
I am here, but in case you guys hear the beep, 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 it's been constantly going for the past hour. All of a sudden there is construction happening at the house next door. So it was unexpected and we're just rolling with it, but I'm here and I'm loving the podcast with Jessica, and I hope you guys are as well. I wanted to not leave you without that most embarrassing moment question though. So let's come back to that. Have you had any thoughts, Jess?
Well, it's kind of a serious one. It's not as funny as maybe some people's, but it's truthfully the most embarrassing moment. There was a time where at work, I accidentally printed something to the printer, like the Word printer at work, instead of to my printer in my direct office, and everybody saw it, and it was not something that was meant for people to see, and it hurt some feelings, because basically what it was is like I was trying to propose some changes to a program, and I was like gathering like, this is why staff don't have the resources that I'm proposing we give them, like this is what happens. And so it was some of those things. And I was so embarrassed so I just always think about that when I think about embarrassment, even though it's so serious. because like people were kind of hurt by it. And my initial reaction was like, basically tell my boss I was sick and go home, because that's probably how I would have reacted at any previous point in my career. And instead I cried in my office and I said, okay, send in every person on that list for me to apologize to personally and explain like what the purpose of it was. And so I did. And I just think that it was a moment of such growth for me, but it was definitely embarrassing. And I was like, seriously, like I can't even like figure out what the right printer is. And then I felt bad I'd even kept the list, but I had such good intentions. And so once I explained those to people, it really was like, I think one of my bigger moments of growth professionally as well, even though, man, it was bad.
We've definitely all had those moments. And I agree with you, like where you can just acknowledge, take responsibility, clarify, apologize, all those good therapeutic tools that we've for sure learned. So someone sent in another very interesting question. And I feel like when they send in very specific, interesting questions, it is specifically for you. So this question is, what is your dream shower curtain?
Oh my gosh, I want to know who sent that question in. because as a kid we had clear shower curtains, and that was like a joke. And I'm like, man, did like a childhood friend send that like happen to like vote for me or something on your thing? Because it was very intimidating to some of our friends that would come over and see like clear shower curtains. They're like, what is wrong with your family? Y'all are weird. And mostly I would yeah. Mostly I'd be like, I think it had to do with like the light, that our bathroom would get really dark if we didn't. And then some of it too, like my 3 teenage girls, like sometimes honestly somebody would come in there and chat and you'd want to be able to see their face. It sounds so weird when I'm saying it, but no, my ideal shower curtain would be like just something really pretty and fancy and not clear now.
Maybe with a clear window or something like that, so you could just face. There you go.
That would be amazing if like you had something like pretty and like grown up looking, and then had like this little window. So if you wanted to make a point when you were talking to someone, like you could look out. That would be amazing. That's my dream shower curtain for sure.
Well, I think that's such a great place to end this awesome Up Close and Personal podcast. Jessica, you're a great sport. Thank you for letting us get to know you better, as well as our collective communities. It's really been a true pleasure, and we hope that you guys join us tomorrow as we interview Chris Swensen. You guys probably know him as the private practice warrior. Chris shares a lot about his difficulties growing up, but how that really helped him become the private practice warrior. And he talks about the mentality and things that he studies. So pretty interesting there. So Startup Nation, we hope you have a great, awesome, and inspired day. And we look forward to continuing to inspire you from startup to mastery. Take care, everybody.
See you next time.
Thanks for joining us on The Private Practice Startup. Visit theprivatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, free trainings, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and so much more.